Okay, finally done with the edit. Now time to upload it. You two have to watch the new video I made. I think it's really cool. I spent a lot of time on it. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
You're gonna love it. Sit down. You too. Okay, I spent a lot of time on this one, so it's really funny. I think you're gonna like it. Today's the big day. Today's the big day. I finally leave my yard. Never mind. Maybe tomorrow. How could they not find that funny? Well, they'll love the next part, though. Kind of struck me. Let me read his comment. In all honesty, it must be hard to make compelling, interesting videos if you don't leave the house, or are not willing to share footage from those times that you do leave the house. Is it possible that my video actually sucks? I still have to post this. They're probably tired from traveling all day yesterday by train. I'm sure that my subscribers will love it. Oh no, he's checking to see how much time is left. Damn, she's checking her phone. Russia, then and now. Now, today's video is a Russia, then and now video from that series, but it's done rather differently than previous ones. Back in 2013, when I was living in the city of Chelyabinsk, I met a gentleman who's an independent journalist named Veniamin. He was working on an independent project back then about foreigners in Russia, and he chose 3 people who had already lived in Russia for a while, and I was one of the 3. Anyhow, he documented parts of our lives and asked each of us, well, some different questions on some various topics. Today I'm going to show you a few. I'm going to show you how I felt about these topics back in 2013, and then tell you how I feel about it now. Thus the theme, Russia, then and now. The first topic I was asked about was, why did you decide to stay in Russia? So here was my answer I gave about 11 or 12 years ago. After I was here for about 3 months, I wanted to go back. It was just too much, not knowing the language, everything. It was just different. I had met my wife prior to coming here in the
apart from my wife, the other main thing that prevented me from going back is I didn't want to give any of my friends the opportunity to say, haha, we told you you'd be back. So I figured I would stay for a minimum of 1 year, then nobody could accuse me of being a loser. And 1 year turned into 2, into 5, into 10, and now almost 13.
Следующая поликлиника закрывает двери.
If I was asked the same question today, my answer would be the same, but perhaps with the following additions. Well, it's a lot of additions, actually. After that video was made, I continued working in Russia for many more years, and I enjoyed my job. My daughters were already in school, and they were doing well. I had friends, and overall, I knew a lot of people in the community. I was fully adjusted to, and I feel integrated into Russian life, and I saw no reason to return to America. I was happy. Why change things? Then after that, I retired. I moved to a different, smaller city in Russia. We had a new place built, and I just love it where I am now. I really enjoy my life here. So again, why change things?
Здравствуйте, сержант Буровинский.
Я здесь, я же говорил. Крикнул.
По привычке.
Ну, что сегодня? Провожаете? Провожаете, кого вчера совершили? Убийство? Второй раз за год уже инкассатор нес. На 20% увеличились разбои по сравнению с тем годом за январь-февраль.
Ну что, безработица растет.
Да, из-за вот этого всего кипиша. Цены растут, зарплату понижают. Где логика? Вообще не верю.
I was asked to talk about something in particular I liked about returning to Russia, something when I first got back. So I told a story about back when I was still smoking. I was in the Russian airport, I think Sheremetyevo, and I really needed a cigarette. I smoked back then. I told how the Russian solution to my problem was much more practical, and in my opinion, more humane than the same situation if it were to happen in America.
So I came from the Sheremetyevo 2, which was international terminal, went over to Sheremetyevo 1. I was alone. I was coming back from the States. I had 2 really big bags, carry-on, and I wasn't checked in yet. So, but I wanted to have a cigarette. The security line was really long outside. So I went to a guard, and my Russian wasn't very good, worse than it is now, which is still not very good. And I said, где можно курить? На улице. I said, я один. Много багаж. So he told me, на toilet. He said, close the door and smoke. Все будет хорошо. So that's one thing I loved about coming into Russia. People, there was some sense. People understood. And I went in the men's room and it was a cloud. So apparently I wasn't the only one with that. In the U.S., they probably take you and arrest you for what? It's not child molestation, it's smoking a cigarette, you know? We like to break laws just like Russians do. And we feel very good when we break a law and we get away with it.
Now, I can't really speak to this situation today because I stopped smoking at about the same time that older video was filmed. I can say that I felt that traveling into Russia back then was more exciting and less predictable. It was like more of an adventure. Today, it's similar to traveling into most other countries. So, the typical, I'm sorry, traveling can be a little bit boring now. The next question concerned, was there something I saw when I first came to Russia that sort of shocked me?
I can tell you something that even now that still shocks me. All right, and that's I don't know what the term would be in English because I've never seen it in my life before. But that would be like a man. Usually it's a man, but I've seen women, babushki too. They walk down the street and suddenly they go blow their nose, and very often it's like. And then they're ready to shake your hand. It's, to this day, that's still, and it makes me absolutely understand why Russians never wear shoes in their house. After seeing that, I want to burn my shoes. But
yeah, this habit was something I never got used to. Well, it was much more common in Chelyabinsk. I don't think I've seen this practiced in Tambov or when I travel to Moscow. So that's good. By the way, I guess the English term for this would be, excuse me, I feel nasty saying it, but you should know the term, snot rocket. Sorry for my forwardness, but I should put a name to it. The question was asked of me, if you had the opportunity today to move you and your family back to America, would you do this?
if somebody said, here, Mark, we're going to give you a house, here's the job, everything's all set, just go, I'd say, well, we'll see. Let's wait. If Obama has 2 more years in office, he doesn't have to run again. The amount of destruction he does to that country in 2 years is going to be breathtaking, amazing. I mean, as it is right now, if my kids were there, the stuff that they would have to learn in schools has nothing to do with education. It has all to do with social experiments. I'm not into it. I'd rather have them just stick around here for now, learn mathematics, learn some other things that would be important in life, not diversity.
Now, I had no idea at that time that things were going to get much, much worse in terms of social experimentation, especially with younger kids. I'm talking about in America. The word transsexual was almost unknown at that time, as opposed to now when it's like part of our vocabulary there. When so many young people nowadays don't know if they're a boy or a girl, it's scary. A whole new, horrible vocabulary has been forced down the throats of American people. Young kids and others started going through the slaughterhouse of surgery to change their sex. So yeah, I made the right decision to stay in Russia and have my girls go through the Russian education system. They never learned about transsexuals in the Russian education system. And now they're both going to good Moscow universities and doing very well. Now, showing how downhill the West has been headed has been a rather popular topic here in Russia, along with so many new YouTube channels about people or families who left the West and moved here due to the cultural breakdown. Now, I came here long ago and I came for different reasons, but I can't disagree that the moral structure in the West has broken down faster than I ever could have imagined over the last several years. And I also would not want to raise my family over there with that stuff going on. It's like some kind of a freak show. I love my country, and it hurt badly and hurts badly to see this race to the bottom. Therefore, I was very happy. Last week was a good week. I was very happy to see Donald Trump win the recent presidential election. In general, to see the Democrats who support these perversions get their asses tossed out of the presidency and totally lose control of Congress. It was wonderful. It was bliss.
Можно 2 молока, 3,2%.
3,2% в
Да, да.
коробочке, в пленочке? В пленочке или в коробочке?
В коробочке.
В коробочке. 100 рублей, еще что?
100? Хорошо. Спасибо.
Пожалуйста.
The closing clip answers the question, do you now feel that you understand Russians? I want to make it sound like, no, I understand Russians. I do not understand Russians. I understand more about Russians now than I did many years ago, but like anything, the more you understand about something, the more you find you don't understand. Well, 11 years after I last answered this question, I can say that in some respects, I can understand Russians more today. But in other ways, I think I understand them even less than 11 years ago. But it's not a fair question. It's like asking a Russian person, do you understand Americans? The true answer to that is a question. The question is, which American? Because people are different. And it's the same here. Which Russian? Because all Russians are different. Thank you very much for watching this video till the end. And I'll see you again in my next video. Until that time, пока.